metric system, and we use the Fahrenheit thermometer as well. It's a silly thing. The centigrade, the Celsius thermometer is much more sensible. 0, the temperature of ice. 100 on the centigrade Celsius scale is boiling point of water. That's really sensible, and you can determine that anytime you want. But the freezing point of water in the Fahrenheit scale is 32 degrees, for some reason I don't understand. And the boiling point of water is 212 degrees. What dumb figures. But why are we doing that in the United States? Now, the only other place in the world that uses the old English system of units like that is Belize. Very small country, very tiny country, you can't find it on a map. And only the United States and Belize. Now that doesn't really add to international harmony in any way that I can think of, but the whole rest of the world, including Norway, works on the metric system, which is the way it should be. But I found out from an American politician, a lady who works in the Congress of the United States of America, I found out inadvertently in a conversation as to why we are still using the old system. It's because of religious lobbyists, people who visit them, all of the politicians regularly, and tell them, oh, you know, you should not be using anything like the centigrade system, or you shouldn't use any of those things. No, don't use that. They say, why? Because it was designed by atheists. It was designed by the people who won the French Revolution, and all of Europe, all the rest of the world changed immediately to adopt this new and much, much, much better system. And science uses it all the time. Yes, science does use it, because they know better. But the interesting thing that the lobbyists tell people are, it was designed by atheists. The worst kind of atheist. What's that? French atheists. They have their ways, and the politicians are all afraid they don't want to offend anybody by using something that was designed by atheists, you see. So, in the United States, we're stuck with it. We have to use the old system. Now, for just a moment, back to the magician as an entertainer. A magician, such as myself, is an entertainer who pretends to have supernatural powers. Now, I put it to you, suppose you're walking down the street in a small town here in Norway, and you're just killing some time in the afternoon, you don't know much about the town, and you see a theater there, and it says, Hamlet, William Shakespeare's play, very, very famous play. It's been translated into many, many different languages all over the world. And you say, wait a minute, I've got some time here. Yes, I have some time. I think I'll take in this Hamlet movie. But not movie, pardon me, the play. And you go inside, you sit down, the actors come out on the stage, and they do a wonderful job. And there's a big round of applause at the end. Everybody's very happy to have seen the show. And the star of the show walks out in a blonde wig, and he takes off the wig. He steps forward, and he takes his bows, and everybody applauds and says, one moment, please. I want to tell you, I am an actor, it's true, but I'm also the Prince of Denmark. You would be insulted to hear this. You know the man was just playing a nasty joke on you. You don't believe he's a Prince of Denmark, but you will listen to astrologers, and you will read your fortunes in the newspapers and such. If you're the average person in Europe, in fact, anywhere in the world, you will tend to listen to those things, and you're not insulted when they tell you things that you know aren't so. So just think of that anecdote there. Now, I'm not an academic at all. I've never had an academic degree. I have lectured at the leading universities and colleges around the world, but I've never had an academic degree, and I don't make any claims to that. So I am a magician, and I am not making any claims to having any academic powers whatsoever. I have no ideas of what the academic life is really all about, except that I mix with academics all the time. Now, I have a theory about PhDs. I'm sure there are some PhDs in the audience, so I hope I don't embarrass you, and I'm not really very serious about this, but this is my theory. As a common observer, I have been to groups as big as this, big auditoriums where the parents are all on one side and the potential PhD candidates are on the other side. They've taken their examination, they've won their degree, but now they're going to be given the little roll of paper with the ribbon on it, you see. And there's a gentleman standing at a big table here, and he has all these rolls of paper out in front of him, and he announces a name. Lady or gentleman stands up, comes up on the stage, everyone applauds, and hands the piece of paper to him, and with the other hand, the right hand, will shake hands with the candidate. Thank you, congratulations. But if you look very carefully to get down close to the stage, the minute that that paper touches the PhD's hand, the PhD rises about an inch. It has a hard time standing upright because it's like skating, you see, on thin ice. And the candidate crosses the stage and goes down to the ice. That person is now a PhD. It's an exalted position, you see. Well, PhDs, really, I swear to you folks, many of them think they know everything right away. I would much rather have an audience full of PhDs than an audience of 9-year-old children, because 9-year-old children are not sophisticated enough to be fooled. Now here's a very simple trick. This is a simple Kleenex, hardly used at all. With a child, when I do a thing like this, the child is not fooled because the child didn't see it actually go into the hand like that. When I do this sort of thing with the adults, I say, oh, I have one in here, looks exactly the same. The adult can be fooled because the adult is sophisticated enough to know that what I did was actually transferring it to the other hand. Not there either. But children are very hard to fool. I would again rather have the PhDs out there. Now, who is to blame for this kind of misinformation? Largely speaking, it is the media. Television, newspapers, magazines, the media in general. They celebrate any kind of woo-woo that comes down the line. Somebody says they can do that, they can fly by clapping their arms, whatever they claim, and they want to interview that person right away, and they'll put it on the news that night, because next night they've got to have another piece of woo-woo that they can show people. They don't care if it's true. They just don't care. And that's the fault of the media, and I think they should be told about it. A quick example of how naive the media can actually be. Some of them aren't terribly smart. They're educated, you see, in the humanities, but they know nothing about science. I was in Mexico City quite some years ago, and they came up with, you've seen the magnetic keys, of course, that are used in hotels now. And they had come up with the magnetic striped key that was used in the doors to unlock the doors. It was one of the first hotels in Mexico that had these keys. So I decided to play a little joke on the media, and there were a bunch of reporters and television people all around me, and I said, let's go up to my room and we have coffee there. Oh, great, okay, fine. So we all went into the elevator, went upstairs, and I went down the hall and I went, oh, I've forgotten my key. And they all laughed and they started to write down, magician forgets his key, can't open the door. Now, I made a reputation as a jailbreaker many years ago. I broke out of 22 jails all over the world. And they're laughing because I can't open my door. I said, oh, wait a minute. I went in my pocket, took out a deck of cards, playing cards, and I went through them. I took out a 3 of diamonds, and I put it into the lock and pulled it out, went click, it opened. Now, what I had done is I had simply taken my magnetic key card and stuck it on the back of the 3 of diamonds, you see. And they didn't see that part. And I put it in. And one of the reporters asked me, I swear, he said, will that work with any playing card? And I told him, no, only with a red 3. And it was in his newspaper the next morning that you can open a hotel door by using the 3 of hearts or the 3 of diamonds. And then the fellow at the cigar counter in the base of the hotel there, who was selling decks of cards, he called me and he said, I sold every deck of cards. Kids were coming around asking great deck of cards. They were throwing away everything except the red threes and then going around the hallways. But the media believed a silly comment like that a red three would open a hotel door. So they're not too smart sometimes. Now, Ed Mitchell, you may know the name Ed Mitchell, he was one of the astronauts, one of those brave gentlemen who traveled out into space and visited the moon. I give him full credit for that. But the New York Times, now you think the New York Times is a pretty high-class newspaper. We certainly think of it that way in the United States of America, I can tell you. The New York Times ran an article on Ed Mitchell. And they said that Ed Mitchell had performed an ESP experiment on coming back from the moon in a rocket, you see. And on the way back, he took a piece of paper and tore it up into 25 little pieces and wrote one of the ESP symbols on the back of it, and then mixed it all up. And then he sent his thoughts out in order of the 25 cards, sent his thoughts out to psychics back on Earth. And he reported that his results were, statistically speaking, were 3,000 to 1 against getting that result. Wow. Now when I read that, I was most impressed. I thought, I wonder how that was done. Maybe there is something to this sort of thing. And then I investigated. The New York Times didn't ask the right questions. It turns out that, first of all, Ed Mitchell, on the way back from the moon, he had agreed for a certain time, 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, I believe it was, that he would be broadcasting out to this psychic. Oh, but wait a minute, there were 3 psychics, not just 1. So he has 3 times as much chance of having a success. Oh, it gets much worse than that. 4 o'clock came and he had another duty to do, and he had to put it aside until 5:30. So the psychics had already written down the order of the cards at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because he couldn't reach them, and he didn't think about it until 5:30 in the afternoon. So they were an hour and a half away. And they wrote down the results. And this is the final thing now. The New York Times didn't ask the right questions? No, they did not. Because it turns out that when he said the results were 3,000 to 1, the results, ladies and gentlemen, were so negative in that test that statistically speaking, it was 3,000 to 1 that the result would be that bad. Not good at all. They missed on almost every one of the cards. The experiment was a total failure. It didn't work. And yet they said the results were 3,000 to 1 against chance. Now that's the New York Times' fault. They didn't ask the right questions of Edgar Mitchell. And he's still flying high on that result. But the truth about it is the experiment was a dead failure. Other examples in the United States. Florsheim shoes. This happens to be a pair of Florsheim shoes I'm wearing. Very fine shoes. They're back in the market again. They had a family that went back 120 years of selling shoes. The finest shoes you can buy in the United States of America, they say. And I believe they're probably right. Then they sold the company, and the company came out with the Magnaforce shoe. Ooh, what could that be? Well, they said that this had magnets, one at the toe, one at the insole, and one at the heel. Special unipolar magnets. There's such thing as a unipolar magnet. If you had a unipolar magnet, you'd have a Nobel Prize right away. There's no such thing. Maybe only a North Pole. You can't do that. It doesn't exist. But I tell you, these shoes were very handy for one thing. Oh, these shoes were designed to help your blood circulate because there's iron in your blood, you see. Hemoglobin, right. That's not attracted by magnetism at all. But they sold the shoes and charged $20 a pair more for the shoes if they had the magnets in them. Now there was one advantage to the shoe, I must admit. If you ever wanted a paperclip, you always had paper clips on the bottom of your shoes. No matter where you went, you would pick up old paper clips. But then the company heard about this, the owners of the original family, the Florsheim family, and they bought the company back, and they got rid of the